Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all four of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video.
I guess we didn't talk about how we're going to approach format or anything. Like, is it just going to be a free-form conversation?
Yeah,
We're not
just free-form it, but I'll introduce.
Cool.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and I'm kicking off the Halloween season a little bit differently this year, because I got a friend in from out of town.
Howdy.
This is Thomas Nickel, a filmmaker, stop-motion animator, and general fan of all things strange, macabre, spooky, and otherwise just plain strange.
The good stuff.
And we are going to be starting off by talking about the classic 1963 film, is it?
Yep.
The Haunting, which is an adaptation of the book The Haunting of Hill House, not to be confused with The House on Haunted Hill, which is completely different, but does have Vincent Price in it. But the reason we picked this is because you're familiar with the Netflix version, I'm familiar with the original version, he wanted to see the original version, and just general thoughts. What do you think of of either version? Like, just share your thoughts on those.
Oh, sure. Well, I very much recommend the Netflix version for anybody who hasn't seen it. The end might be a little take it or leave it, but it's very much grown on me. I was really enjoying seeing the elements. I would imagine that the original adaptation is a little closer to the book, and it's fun to see some of the elements that they took and made into a very, very different story for the Netflix version. So if you've seen that and are familiar with it, don't assume that you know anything about what the original story has in it.
Yeah. And also, just to be clear, neither of us have actually read the book yet. It is on our list, though. So, let's see. So that's your thoughts on the Netflix version, but the original version, was it anything like what you expected?
I tried to go in without a lot of expectations. I like enjoying media on its own terms.
Oh, yeah.
And if I can go in without knowing, as little as possible and just let it unfold the information that it needs to tell the story it wants to tell. So I tried not to have expectations. Obviously, I have the context of seeing the Netflix version and, when character names, you see Theodora and Nell and Luke, and it's like, yeah, okay, I know who those people are, and I don't at all because they're completely different people in this story.
Oh, yeah.
But then, a lot of, visual elements like Nell dancing with invisible partner, the great spiral staircase, there's little things that they use in very different ways in the two different adaptations, but, clearly they're drawing from same sort of material, they have similar motifs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very interesting to figure out, what is the story that the one that I'm familiar with came from, and focusing on the it made more sense to me as the shorter, self-contained story. The Haunting of Hill House, the series, obviously is a mini-series. It's much longer in terms of whole entire runtime. And so it's spread out over a lot more time, and this one takes place entirely in the house over a few nights, and is much more focused on, questioning what is naturally happening. They make a distinction between, the paranormal and the, what was it?
They use the term preternatural.
Preternatural, that was, and the preternatural of one generation is the natural of the next generation. And so just sort of playing with, are these natural events, is it explicable or not? And, through the lens of the main character in the movie is Nell. You get an actual internal monologue for her in a whole lot of scenes, and she is her journey through it is very central to the story in a way that the others are, more ride-alongs.
It's a deeply psychological movie for what is essentially a haunted house film.
Yeah.
Because, normally the haunted house stuff, they get pretty explicit towards the end that there's ghostly happenings going on, but here they do kind of leave it ambiguous. Like, clearly something's going on. There's stuff that everybody witnesses, stuff that happens when Nell isn't present, that leaves you thinking, okay, clearly there's something up, but curiously we never get an explanation. We just, the closest thing we get is that the house was born evil, as they say, which, why would it be that way? I mean, there's this overarching mystery, and in a good horror fashion, it's not really solved. All we know is that, like, something's going on, but we don't know what. But we do know that Nell is deeply troubled.
Yes.
Was she that troubled in the Netflix one, or?
Everybody's troubled in the Netflix one, but yes. I think that I would say that a lot of the journey that Nell's character goes through in the movie version is transferred to a different character, the mother in the Netflix version. But Nell herself has her own very troubled story in the series. I thought it was interesting in the film version that Nell's backstory herself kind of ties into the history of the house in a, not in a direct way, but in a sort of a narrative parallel. Her background with her mother, in this case, sort of relates to someone else who lived and died in the house, and they don't lean on that as explicitly as you might expect, given that it's very clearly set up. I don't know if that's explored, more deeply in the original story, and they just sort of glazed over it for the movie, or whether this is how it
I think the
has
movie,
been from the start.
I would say the movie just kind of expects you to pick up on it.
I mean, you certainly can.
Yeah.
It is very much right there, and it just doesn't connect the dots for you.
Yeah, it expects you to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of other things. Like, I kind of noticed that when the investigator, his wife...
Yeah, Grace.
Yeah, when we see her at the top of the balcony looking in through the attic, she looks eerily similar to the young woman who was the caretaker that threw herself off of there. And it's like, it's not, again, explicitly stated. Nothing in the movie is explicitly stated. But there's this, I think that lends itself to the idea of you can make up your own mind about what's going on around here. And that, I mean, it takes an especially sharp writing skill to do that. There's a lot of stuff they don't explicitly say in the original movie, but if you're paying attention, you can pick up on it, like what's going on with Theo. I mean, back in the 60s, they couldn't explicitly say what they were hinting at, of course. That was still not a openly talked about subject, but
that is carried over in the Netflix series.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
But, since I brought it up, I mean, I don't want to turn it into a whole discussion just about that, but, like, how was that handled differently, if it was handled differently?
I mean, it was... so what we're talking about is Theo is a lesbian.
Indeed.
In the Netflix series, then it's just, part of her character. She has a girlfriend, that there's this sort of subplot that... I mean, I say girlfriend, it's very much over. She hooks up with someone who wants to have a continuing relationship, and there's some tension there, and it's just, part of her character arc.
They allude to that in the original. She does say, we have a place.
Yeah.
She doesn't say who the other person is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing that it's so much easier in, with modern sensibilities to let someone just have that be part of their character.
Yeah.
It isn't really central to the story in any way. I will say some of the writing didn't quite land for me.
Oh,
I think,
like what?
So the responses of the other characters to Nell's, we'll say, descent into madness. That's not overselling it, I don't think.
Yeah, whether the house is haunted or not, that's unambiguous.
Yeah, you know, like I mentioned, we have access to internal monologue for her, and you know, as the movie goes on, then it becomes more and more sort of absorbed in this sort of fantasy that she gets lost in, essentially. And even when she is very explicitly speaking in terms of, you know, the house wants me, I am the one. The other characters are not really recognizing necessarily that she is going through a very intense psychological thing. They're like, oh yeah, no, sure, like, you know, you can drive your car, that's cool. We'll just send someone along with you, you'll be fine. That and her relationship with John, the investigator. Clearly we were supposed to feel that there was, you know, some chemistry there, some tension. He was, you know, as we mentioned, his wife, he's married, so, you know, but I really never got, aside from the expectation that we were going to, you know, this is how the characters react to each other, it didn't feel motivated to me.
Which end of it didn't feel motivated?
I didn't understand how she was appealing to him at all. Like, she was, you know, clearly out of everybody there. Then I can certainly, you know, imagine him being concerned for her well-being. Like, she was clearly not dealing with staying this time in the haunted house as well as everybody else. But instead of reading as you know, just concern for her well-being, then it was certainly reading as, you know, he's feeling this mutual attraction as well, and I didn't quite follow that.
Maybe that's another thing that they couldn't have quite gone all the way with back then. Because, I don't know, like, it might have been a specific choice to maybe have him be more like he's not going all the way, like he's always got in the back of his mind that he's married, so he's concerned, maybe he is feeling something, but he's keeping that in check.
Well, I mean, what I wasn't following was why he was feeling that at all. Like, the concern I get, like, absolutely, but the attraction to this character,
unless that's just supposed to be the way Nell is seeing it.
That is possible. I hadn't thought of that. Like, if everything that we're seeing is somewhat through Nell's eyes, then there could be some distortion there. I would have to think about it in that light. That is entirely possible.
That would be my interpretation anyway.
Yeah.
Because we do get most of it from her perspective. Very little of the movie is not from her perspective. So, I think when you bring that in mind, and you also remember she's steadily losing her marbles, and she had lost quite a few of them before we even met her, you can get a sense that some of the way she perceives certain characters might not be exactly what's going on.
Sure. I will say the movie does make very explicit visually in a number of places that, you know, things are topsy-turvy, we're into Wonderland now, we got canted angles, we got weird, you know, close-ups on different things that are, you know, very disorienting in a very effective way, but, you know, we don't necessarily get the sense throughout that we are getting a specific character's perspective.
No,
unless we're having, you know, the direct, you know, seeing her reacting to things, hearing what she's thinking to herself.
Yeah. I mean, no film is perfect, obviously.
Certainly.
And we're, of course, talking about it as people who've just seen it. We haven't really listened to the commentary or read much behind the scenes, so we're just interpreting here. So
I would imagine that some of these things would probably make more sense if we read the original book.
Oh, probably.
You know, it could be that there are elements of this that were adapted in because that's part of the story and it's explored in more depth in the original material, but neither of us know that. So we'll just roll with what we can see.
Indeed. And what we could see was a very subtly played, very slow-boiled haunted house movie, but, like, how do you feel that part was played? Do you think the slow burn was a good way to do it? Just
yeah, I think it was very effectively done for, you know, a movie that very much wants to leave things ambiguous whether there is actual supernatural involvement or not. It does a good job of there is one scene where it is very explicitly something super weird is happening. When you have a giant wooden door that is breathing, that's a little more explicitly out there.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's played much more subtly.
Yeah. Like I said, something's happening, we just have no idea what. I heard that, now we didn't watch this, but I did hear that the 1999 remake was way more explicit in what was going on. It had full answers, it didn't really leave much to the imagination with anything, really. And a lot of people have said it's inferior to that original because of it. And likely it's also going to be viewed as inferior to the Netflix version. Because, from what I've seen of the 1999 one, it almost goes for, dare I say it, almost more of a comic book movie feel, where there's got to be an action-packed climax, as opposed to something that just sort of is dark and psychological and kind of lingers with you, especially since you're not quite sure what to make of it. Which, that makes good horror, but like an action-packed climax, not necessarily full-on horror, unless it's very well and specifically played.
There's a lot of space in horror for all kinds of horror movies.
Oh, yeah.
Slow Burn is a great one.
Yeah. And for this kind of thing, it was definitely well played. Good use of light and shadow. You were talking about the wonky camera angles at one point. The one that I still remember quite clearly is the one where it looks like they're using the fisheye lens, and then suddenly it pans out when Nell runs into it, and you see it's actually just a mirror.
That was I really enjoyed that shot.
Yeah. There are some really cool shots like that, and even just the way they frame the outside of the house. Mm-hmm. They keep talking about how when they're outside, the house is staring, looking at Nell. And, Amityville Horror, they had those quarter moon windows that they lit up to look like eyes and made it literal. They don't do that with this.
But they do have pairs of windows in a lot of places.
Pairs of windows everywhere. Sometimes lit up, sometimes not. Mm-hmm. And you still get the sense that the house has a presence. And it's a very, very interestingly designed house, too, with everything inside of it. It does feel like you could almost call it ostentatious in some ways, but it's evoking a very specific style. I think they were kind of trying to make it like the ultimate haunted house in that regard.
I believe that, yeah.
Yeah. And... yeah, it is. I certainly think it deserves to be called a classic.
Yeah. I won't fight that.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. You can find it physical media. It's streaming on Just Max now. And, yeah, it is definitely an interesting movie to watch during this particular season. A haunted house movie unlike any other, at least at the time. It inspired many that came after. You have any final thoughts to share on that?
I don't think so.
What about for the Netflix one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely watch it. And all the other Michael Flanagan. I'm actually in the middle of rewatching Midnight Mass right now and remembering how great it really is.
There you have it. Anything you want to promote while you're here? Anything you've got going on, or
I have nothing to promote. I just have
But you do have
videos out online. I've got if you want to see some of the stuff that I've made, my website is tdnicol.com. I'm sure he'll put it in the description.
I shall. And I guess that's all. And we got it all in one take too. So
right.
Feel free to sign off however you'd like.
Nice to meet you.
That'll do. And until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
I got chills.
Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.